Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Legal Weekly Wine. This is a special edition. We are coming to you on the night of Thursday, October 19th, into October 20th. So this is kind of not quite a 24-hour deal we have going on, but we are reporting on Sidney Powell's guilty plea for today. We were already in the midst of taping our normal one, which is now out, so you can view that, and that's about Trump's gag orders. But this special edition is addressing specifically and only Sidney Powell's guilty plea this morning, October 19th, what it means, what it was, and what we look for to happen next. I'm Virginia Tarani. I am the CEO of the Law Unscripted, which hosts this podcast, as well as a practicing attorney in DC, Virginia, and Maryland with Tarani Law, because you never need a lawyer till you do. Great. Now we've got everybody saying it. Excellent. We'll keep working on it. And with me, I have Chelsea Rogers, who is also with Tarani Law. And Chelsea, tell us a little bit about you.
Hey, everybody. I'm Chelsea. I am a recent grad and a recent bar passer. Woo! There has to be a better word for that. I'm sure there is one that's just not coming to mind at the moment.
It works.
Lawyer. Oh. Touche. Here. And so hopefully at the end of this month, I'll be sworn into the Maryland Bar Association. And I'm very excited to talk about plea deals today.
I think we are all very excited.
It's one of my passion topics. I have a lot of feelings about plea deals.
I think we all do. So yeah, stay tuned, everybody. We're going to get to Dr. Vial in a second, but truly, we have been looking forward to this special episode so much that we agreed, all three of us, to tape this morning and tonight so that we could get both episodes out as quickly as possible to stay on top of this breaking issue. And with us then staying up late himself is the one and only Dr. Vial. Good to have you too.
Thank you. May I make a pitch?
Yes.
So I was hoping it would be in the mail today, but it's not. So it's not, it doesn't show, does it? In any event.
Oh, it doesn't because of your background.
The fifth edition of my Encyclopedia of Constitutional Amendments, Proposed Amendments, and Amending Issues, 2 volumes were just published today.
Congratulations.
I don't have my copy, but it was published. And you can get your Kindle edition from Amazon.com, even as we speak.
Oh, wonderful. So everybody pull out your Kindle, pull out your orders. And here we go. Oh my gosh, both of you. This is truly, I put out a TikTok for the Law Unscripted this morning in relation to this. I think all three of us, I hope to be correctly saying, have been researching and watching this issue since we stopped our original recording this morning. I know I have. Quite the audio version, for those of you who are on the audio version, it's quite late at night and you can't see them, but they're nodding, even though they're not saying yes out loud. So just for our, audio audience, our radio audience, so that they know.
There have been some other events today, including a Biden speech, developments in the Middle East, and the like.
Yes, there have been. And Dr. Vial, I would like us to touch briefly on those. I know that the episode is largely focused and committed to this guilty plea, but we do want to acknowledge what else has gone on because it has been quite an eventful Thursday. And you have mentioned even Biden's speech this evening. We're taping even after that. So what were your takeaways from the day as a whole and even President Biden's speech?
Well, again, the other big event that we touched on earlier today is the race for the speaker continues. There was some thought that the third vote on Jordan might be today. It's been postponed till tomorrow, or I guess the day that most people are going to be viewing. It looks like his support is slipping, and part of it is coming from the perception, and it's hard to know whether to blame him for this or just people who are adamant followers.
Right.
But many of the congressmen are reacting to what they perceive to be improper pressure on them. And that, this goes to what we were talking about this morning. The gag order for Trump largely centers on, you can't say something that would be likely to incite someone to lawless action, particularly violence against an individual. And I think, the pressure got so strong that people said, if we don't stop this now, imagine what it's going to be like if he's speaker and he tries to whip us into a vote. Are they going to call on our constituents every time? People don't like to be pushed around.
Right. And especially threatened with, death threats.
Well, and again, he may not be, I doubt, I don't think he was making these calls, and he may not have even intentionally encouraged it, but we live in a time where passions are so strong that if you have a dry forest, the implications of putting a lighted match there are much stronger than they are if you're in a monsoon.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's a little bit of update. Truly, everyone, Thursday has been a little crazy. And honestly, I expect Friday to be a little crazy too.
Let me add the one thing so we've covered it with the Biden speech. I think what Biden is trying to do is sort of look ahead if this situation in the House can be resolved one way or the other. Republicans, a lot of them don't want to give on aid to Ukraine, but would be in very precarious position if they didn't give aid to Israel, and to some degree vice versa. And so I think and I think actually the linkage that he makes is a very logical linkage. Appeasement wherever it occurs, and some of Biden's opponents, although I think it also applied to Trump, would argue that one of the things that emboldened people was our hasty retreat from Afghanistan. It made us look weak, and when we look weak, nature abhors a vacuum. And the United States, for better or worse, we have been sort of the world's policeman. We've been the only, the major superpower after the basic demise of the Soviet Union. And when our credibility is hurt, the occasions for foreign aggression are increased. And, Ukraine, certainly by comparison to Russia, and Israel, certainly by comparison to Hamas, which hasn't had an election, I believe now in 17 years, these are democratic players. These are people whose ideals are more closely aligned with ours than those of the more authoritarian regimes.
Okay. Definitely good thoughts. And by the time this program airs, since we are going from the night into the morning, our viewers and listeners may already be seeing what's happening with the beginning of the trial for Kenneth Chesebro. As we know, what's been happening is tomorrow, Friday, when you will be listening, the 20th, October 20th, is supposed to be the start of jury selection for Kenneth Chesebro and Sidney Powell. And these are two of the 19 defendants who were charged in the state prosecution in Georgia, brought by Fanni Willis in her office for election fraud, racketeering. And ultimately, Trump was the number one indictee, right? The one we're all focused on. But along with him, these 18 lead like a list of, the top of the top of who we've been watching and seeing in the Trump election scheme, or I hate to use insightful words, trying to use more neutral words, but at least since the 2020 election, the players that we've been seeing more often, such as Rudy Giuliani, attorney John Eastman, Mark Meadows, Kenneth Chesebro, we've got Sidney Powell, of course, and then what are some of the others? There's another one or two that are higher ranking names. Jenna Ellis, I think, is fairly well known in all of this, but a list of who's who, right, in the Trump election and the campaign. And Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro made the biggest gamble in this case. And we've talked about it on this show of, did they make a mistake by demanding speedy trial? And Chelsea, you're smiling. So I know you've got a thought or two as to whether they did make a mistake that brought us to today.
I think it's really interesting. And I know we've talked about it on here before, but trial strategy is the most fascinating part of the law to me. And especially these things of like, generally, excuse me, my cat is yelling. So if you can hear that, audio listeners, I do apologize. Perfect. But the idea of a speedy trial, like obviously you have these constitutional rights, and it's that the prosecution doesn't have a lot of time to get together their evidence, right? Like that's the strategy version of it, is that you kind of force them into a trial more quickly than they may have wanted to.
Right.
But now we have a plea deal, and then we have, I don't know, I have a gut feeling that we're going to get another plea deal tomorrow, but we'll see.
Yeah, we're on the steps of the courthouse. The late night deal, the deal on the steps of the courthouse, all of the phrases you can think of, is truly the last minute deal. And many attorneys refer to this. It's a known game, so to speak. I'm in the civil arena now, but I did more than 10 years with the criminal world on both sides of the fence, on each side at different times.
With a criminal and a victim?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, indeed. And even in the civil world now, it's the same as people will play the end game, almost like playing chicken.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm not going to settle. Take me to court, right? Like that's the game.
Exactly.
So the question is, okay, from the non-lawyer, the question is, my understanding is Chesebro has already been offered like one felony instead of 6 or 8, and apparently turned it down. So
that is what's been leaked to the media.
So if you're the prosecutor, does it mean enough to you not to have to go through an extra 4 or 5 months of trial and to have 2 convictions nailed down prior to the next one, to offer him misdemeanor charges, which is what they did for Powell, as opposed to what was reported to be on the table?
So instead of a felony, I think they're, yes, overall, I think would be the option, is that there is an incentive for them where the more players fall, the more they have against Trump. So the more, the more ammo they have in their weapon, so to speak, that if because each of them, we've only had 2 so far out of the 19, but the bail bondsman who also pled guilty to, I believe, 5 misdemeanors, his deal was the same as Powell's in the sense that they both had to agree to testify in future trials regarding this affair. So if they continue to fall, the more of them that continue to have the agreement that includes that language that they will testify against, or in the other trial, and I guess not against, but in the other trials that come through, then that's one more witness against Trump.
Yeah.
And if he is the one in just a second, but yeah, if he is the ultimate goal, I think the prosecutors could say, yes, I'll give him, they make a call, I'll give him the same deal that Sidney took. But yes, go ahead, Dr. Vial.
So if Chesebro goes to trial by himself, can he say, why is it if there's a conspiracy of 19 people, I'm the only one they're coming after in this trial? If he would say that, can the prosecution say, well, the only reason is you asked to come to trial early? So he can't pull that, right? I mean, you say it's a conspiracy and I'm the only one left. How can I spar with him? But they would be able to introduce evidence that others are to be tried still.
I don't think they can technically, I don't think either side can technically say that there are other defendants, except in impeachment terms. And they're going to have to craft really fine language as to how to say it to the jury, because ultimately it's not the full indictment that's read to the jury at the beginning. Is, today we're in the case of, ladies and gentlemen of the jury who are sitting for the voir dire and come together. You are listening to the state of Georgia versus Kenneth John Chesebro.
Yes.
Right.
And
Instead
that's
of-
how it's read. It's not the entire indictment.
It's not
He
Trump
has-
at all that they're reading out.
There's no, I mean, Trump is going to be mentioned
Right.
in the trial, but it's not read off in his
Right.
charges. And what would be mentioned is this count one, which, you know, most of them, not all of them, but most of them have been charged with, is, well, maybe it is all of them. Let me check my trusty actual indictment here. It is all of them. Every single one has been charged under one, which is the violation of the Georgia RICO Act. And we're going to talk about that, Dr. Vial. I know that's super important. So you can say, I expect, if it follows most patterns of most criminal trials, and I believe it would be the same in Georgia, you would be able to say he's being charged with this RICO violation, meaning that he and others conspired, and you can list the others because you have to talk about them. You have to say that he's part of a conspiracy, that he's part of a network, and you have to know who those players are in order to know where he fits in the organization. But they may be barred depending on their motions in limine, their protective order motions. They may be barred from specifically saying this one pled guilty, this one hasn't had a trial. And that's my guess, is that there's going to be very fine limits placed on what can and cannot be said to the jury. They can, I am convinced that they will be able to say, if Sidney Powell testifies against Kenneth Chesebro, well, you were on trial for the same things, weren't you?
Well, you
that
were
is
indicted for it,
acceptable. You were indicted. Well, you were indicted with felonies.
You pled,
You got a sweetheart deal, didn't you?
Deal of the century. Are you kidding me? You go
Mhm.
from 7, you're indicted under 7 felonies, and then you end up pleading to 6 misdemeanors that, as long as you could comply with the terms of the probation under Georgia's First Offender Act, are gone. If, as long as she pays what she needs to, she's, does her 6 years of probation or whatever, her record's clean. What a deal.
Yeah, what a deal. I'll drink to that. So since it's the weekly wine and it's so late, we do have our wine. Chelsea and I, Dr. Vial, did you have your water at least this time?
I do, yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, good. We're all drinking tonight. I have gone back to the Battlefield White through Mariah Vineyards. I do think the Battlefield is the way to go. It seems like that's what we're all on the world and national and international stages. Chelsea, what did you choose tonight?
I am sticking with my choice from earlier, good old Winking Owl from Aldi. It's growing on me, though. Earlier, it was hitting me a little rough. I'm not going to lie. I was just not prepared for it. It's a little less sweet than the wine I like to drink, but I think it's growing on me.
Okay. Well, cheers again, everybody. Thank you both for staying up so late with me to do this. It just seems too monumental not to address. So cheers. Okay. Now, Dr. Vial, I'm coming back to you because before we started this program tonight, you reminded me that we had done an episode previously about the Georgia election case. And we had discussed, I believe Chelsea and I actually had done this, that we had discussed in detail what the case meant, how it was defined, and touching on RICO. What is the the violation of Georgia RICO, the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act? And I think it is important tonight on this program to actually define RICO. What is this crazy law that they're all indicted under? 19 people are indicted under. And how does it? And in this way, I think, Dr. Vial, Chelsea, I'd love for you to do the definition. And Dr. Vial, I'll turn to you afterwards to try to connect the dots between Kenneth Chesebro's part in this and Sidney Powell's, because they're a little bit separated. So Chelsea, give us a quick definition of what this act is.
Yes. And so I actually pulled it from Georgia. So we're going to talk about the racketeering activity and what it says. I'm reading right off of the Georgia statute right here. engaging in at least 2 acts of racketeering activity in furtherance of one or more incidents, schemes, or transactions that have the same or similar intents, results, accomplices, victims, or methods of commission, or otherwise are interrelated by distinguishing characteristics and are not isolated incidents, provided
That's
at
not
least
clear.
No, this is okay. So this is
I'm
word
just saying,
salad.
I mean, you can keep reading, but
No, this is word salad, right? What they're saying is essentially any group of people who do more than one act together in furtherance of the same goal, if it is an immoral or illicit goal, you are racketeering. It's Georgia's definition is so broad that all of those words I just said meant absolutely nothing, because I can't think of a single thing that doesn't fit into that. Like
yeah, I think the biggest thing is, corrupt acts.
Yeah.
That's the idea. I think the basis of the statute of that and similar statutes, the Federal Racketeering Act, that they all began with an idea that you could get to minions fairly easily, but you couldn't get the boss. So you had to create a law that would get to the boss.
And Giuliani specialized in this.
Didn't he?
Mostly
I know.
against organized crime. That's how he made his reputation. And so there are elements, of course, he's not in this trial. He'll be in the next if it happens. But there are elements of Greek tragedy here. Yeah. Someone who's sort of hoisted on his own petards.
Yeah. No, it's very true, is because that is how he made his mark, how he, and of course he was the mayor. But that's how later. Later. But that's how he brought himself up. That's how he distinguished himself in his career, is these federal RICO charges and bringing down organized crime. And that's what it's for, is to hit organized crime, to show that there's an enterprise. Yeah. There is an organization, there's a corrupt organization, even if they don't file for an LLC down at, at the tax division in the county, whatever they call themselves, they're an organization. And not all the players have to know about each other. They don't all have to know the whole thing. They don't all have to be involved in the whole thing. If it's a gang or a drug dealer, you don't know who Joe Blow is down on the street selling, your final product, but you don't have to.
Right.
As long
Escobar
as
definitely didn't meet all of the people who are on the street slinging his drugs, right? Like, that's the thing. Right? He definitely didn't know. He could walk past his own drug dealer and have no idea.
Right. So the way they're setting this up is all of these 19 little people are involved in an overall scheme to overturn an election that went for Biden. So to wrongfully overturn, to interfere with the polling, the ballots, oaths of officers, to do all of this to basically remove a lawfully lawfully elected president, and replace with someone who was not lawfully elected, is the overall scheme. And Dr. Weil, that brings me back to you as to how in the world then, if we're looking at this as a racketeering enterprise with organized crime, if we look at Trump as the head of it, as the boss we have to get to, where in the world do Kenneth Chesebro and Sidney Powell fit in this?
Well, they're both his attorneys, or were at one time. They both peddle, I don't know if that's a legal term, but they both presented themselves in press conferences where they made very strong allegations against Dominion voting machines, against poll workers, against a whole variety of people that have proven not to be true. And in Chesebro's case, if I understand it, he seems to be, maybe with Eastman, one of the architects of, how do we get an alternate group of electors that can claim that they had the votes of Georgia or whatever states are involved. And so, but I think it went beyond, it appears to have gone beyond clever lawyering. Why don't we try this? Well, you can try this if this isn't illegal or immoral, or both. And it appears as though this one was illegal. You're getting people to certify that they have been elected when they have not been elected. and they certify that under oath. And so, he's essentially, if assuming the charges are proven, he essentially has led others. And, what often happens in these you call it a criminal enterprise in a RICO case, but often you only get so far up the ladder.
Right.
And who knows what prosecutors might be willing to give if they thought they could directly pin, Trump, who they believe to be the primary mover here. Now, I want to ask another question as a layperson, because you've mentioned how much bargaining takes place right before a trial, and the possibility that Chesebro may join Powell. Tell me when that ends. Can that, once the trial starts, is it then too late? Or, you can do
Not at all.
Do it in the middle of a trial?
You absolutely can. You can do it until the jury comes back with their answer.
Okay. But you'd have to have both sides willing, right? So
yes.
The prosecution, if they're having a good case, they have little incentive to bargain, as right now they don't know for sure how the case is going to go, how it would be perceived. So the likeliest time would be before, and am I right if you're on behalf of the state, if you spent a month and God knows how many dollars and how many people you've inconvenienced, you're probably going to be less willing to extend a bargain than if somebody takes your plea and saves you the trouble.
Absolutely.
Unless you're in the middle of the trial, the defendant realizes it's over for them, but they have a critical piece of information. And if that person has enough to bargain with, that it's worth letting the kind of little fish go.
Sure.
Because that information, that's the other thing, which would be interesting if he does have information he's holding on to for an opportune moment.
Am I right? It's in Trump's interest, presumably, for Chesebro not to plea.
Correct.
Both because he's not going to testify against Trump, but also this way the prosecution needs to advance much of the evidence that they would later use in a Trump case. So
yes,
if the case goes forward, Trump will have a preview in many respects of what to expect, in a way that if there's a plea bargain, he does not have the same preview. So the prosecution actually has a fairly high incentive still to bargain here.
I absolutely agree.
Probably will not, unless the trial just turns out to be a disaster, he probably will not have a much stronger case than he will tomorrow morning for giving me a lower plea. I
agree. I think if anything, here are my thoughts, which I'm sharing anyway and continue to share. So I want to start with the thought and the reminder that Chesebro and Powell were forced together in this trial.
Yes.
That they were the only ones who demanded speedy trial. And under Georgia's very strict speedy trial rules, they had to be done before the end of October, or they had to be started.
Chesebro was first, right?
He was.
So he, in a way, got sort of sidetracked. I don't know why. I hope it's, well, I don't know why I feel this, but I feel that Powell is a little bit lower hanging fruit than he is, and that her statements in press conferences seem far more outrageous, and there seems to be evidence that even among her own team, she was regarded as something of an outlier. So remember, I think when we had a discussion before that, well, Chesebro, maybe he's made a good move in trying to go first, but then when he was joined by Powell, it's like
he groaned.
This may not be somebody he wants to be. And maybe she feels the same way.
They did, though, because they both filed motions to sever their cases from each other. They said, we don't want to be in the same case. I'll take one and you take another time.
Right.
And their assertions were essentially, I was I'm being charged, not that I was in this because they don't want to plead to it. I'm being charged with this piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I never met with the other person. I never talked with the other person. I don't know who they are, what they do, except for what's in the press. And I don't want to be associated with them.
Yeah.
Right.
And especially Chesebro seemed to really have a very strong argument against being joined with Sidney Powell, to very similar terms, if I recall in the press, that he didn't want to be associated with that crazy person, who's even got her own nickname in most of the press of the Krakan. So, which is not a nice nickname, but was used when she was doing the press conferences initially after the election results were coming in, and made some kind of reference, if I recall, to, she was about to release the Krakan.
You better tell us what that is, because
it's a mythical sea monster.
Right.
Where in mythology, it would the sea monster would come out of the depths, and I believe they sacrificed a virgin to him or something. Don't
It's
quote
in
me on
Pirates of
it.
the Caribbean.
Well, I mean, it's used in the Pirates of
But
the
no, but
Caribbean.
that's what I'm saying. For reference, for people who need a picture, it's in those movies.
Oh,
Okay, that's not where it comes from, but I'm
No,
glad
I
you
know. I'm a total mythology nerd, but I'm just saying for my friends
okay,
out
I'm
there.
going to test Chelsea's knowledge. What would Thomas Hobbes have called it?
Oh gosh.
You know? His
Hobbes?
greatest book title?
Leviathan? No, that's
Okay,
not him.
Virginia.
What is it?
I was going to answer the same thing, was Leviathan.
That's all I can think of.
Leviathan.
Oh, I
yeah.
was right. Okay.
Yeah, Leviathan is his major work.
Okay, good. That's what I was thinking. But
all
then
political theorists teach. Yes.
Yes, but then I second guessed myself, so I was over
Best
here
line, and you
mumbling
can
into the
tell he
mic.
wasn't an attorney, because no attorney could use words like "the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short." And it reminds me of a little advertisement for somebody that I do not know, but I publish from time to time for the Law Book Exchange, which is located in New Jersey. And I see that they have a book coming out which looks really endearing on law in Charles Dickens.
Oh.
And they deal both with Charles Dickens's personal encounters with the law and then his portrayal of laws and legal proceedings in his novels.
Oh, that's
Doesn't that sound fun?
That does. It really does.
That does sound good.
So while you're reading that, and then also going back to Thomas Hobbes and the Leviathan, you can think of Sidney
I've
Powell.
gotten us off track.
No,
that's what happens when you interview me this late at night.
No, I'm
It's
just glad that I didn't get it wrong. I was really panicked there for a second.
No, you did.
Because that was the only thing I could think of. But then I was like, I don't know.
Yep.
Okay, Virginia, you've been asking a lot of questions.
Yeah,
a theory at you.
Yeah, no, I got to finish my theory first. I've been dying for it.
Okay, yes.
But let's come back to yours for sure. Okay, so they both, right? They did not want to be tried together.
Absolutely.
Especially Chesebro. He's like, I don't want to be associated with the Krakan. I'm afraid that, and she made similar, but that was what they put out in the press. I don't think they actually said that in legal pleadings, though I don't know, honestly, I just don't know. But the idea is that there's going to be a stink upon the other party. Yeah. Where if they become so enraged against one party and they so dislike the one, well, the other one's sitting over there too together. And if I associate them, then the stink of one's going to, become the stink of both.
That's a legal term, right? The stink.
Oh, absolutely. It's got to be in some cases. But, you look at them, you combine the people who are sitting in the same courtroom with all the same actions. And they just kept saying, look, we're on two. Chesebro's in this false elector scheme. Sidney Powell's in the polling interference scheme. So they're two totally separate schemes, alleged schemes in this wider conspiracy. And honestly, I think that Chesebro has been outlasting her. And I think, if anything, and goodness knows I've made some wrong choices here on this show throughout the last year, but I have a thought that he is going to at least start the trial. Now that he is alone without Sidney Powell, I think that's what he wanted anyway. He was disgusted and disappointed to be put together with him. Now it's him by himself and his lonesome, which he prefers. I think it gives his attorneys the way to try to exclude some evidence as irrelevant because it doesn't have anything to do with what he did or did not do. So he might be able, depending on the legal maneuvering and the law that they put behind it, he may be able to keep out much of the alleged conspiracy after his actions and may completely be able to divest himself of anything regarding Sidney Powell, the Dominion voting systems, the election workers, and just focus on the fake electors and say, look, his whole defense of, look, I'm an attorney.
Yeah.
I think about legal arguments all the time, and I thought I had a credible basis to make this argument. So in my mind, I think he's relieved. I think he will go forward. But Dr. Vial, to your point, I think he'll be looking over the next month, seeing how it plays out. And then if it's really going badly, he said they could call the prosecution back up and say, let's revisit. The prosecution says, that's great, but the deal's not half as sweet as it used to be.
Yeah.
Because you've caused us to go through already a month of this. But there at no point is he required to continue to plead not guilty. Even in front of the jury, even before it comes back, he can plead guilty at any time without a plea deal. I don't know if it's in his best interest to do so, but he doesn't have to have a plea deal in order to plead guilty.
By the
All
way,
right, that was my long-winded idea.
Chelsea needs to say something, but I need to tell you something that's going to deflate you just a little bit.
Oh no!
So I was
I'm cutting Dr. Vial off now.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I was picking up some things from an auction the other day, and I came directly from work, so I had my suit on, and she said, "Are you an attorney?" And I said, "No, I'm a professor." And she said, "Oh, that's good." It's okay. I think she really was going to come after me if I was an attorney. So there are some advantages.
Well, at least it's only one attorney rather than two sitting there.
Well, that's true.
Chelsea, thank you for letting me finish. I've been saving that up all night, but please go ahead.
I think it's a good point. And mine kind of tags along with that. So a little addition to your theory instead of separate. We've been talking about how much of a sweetheart deal this plea offer was. And you can hear my cat screaming for his dinner. I hope you guys enjoy
hear him.
Oh,
you enjoy the dulcet tones of cat screams, I hope. But this is my theory because that is such a good deal. Like, I mean, truly such a good deal. I think
Powell has.
That Powell has. I mean, I think any of your criminal defendants would have been happy to have such a sweet deal in any of their cases. But from the prosecution side, part of me wonders, once they decided that they were going to be together, Powell and Chesebro were going to be together, if the prosecution, because this is what I would do, my baby attorney self, thinking trial strategy, right? I would say, great, there is one deal on the table. It is a really, really sweet deal. Whoever takes it first gets it. And like, this is a thing that happens.
It is.
And part of me wonders if that's what happened here because of just how nice the deal is.
And let me add, let me ask something here. I'm asking more than telling because I'm not sure. But when I looked at the deal with Powell, yes, I think she's guilty of far worse than she's pled to. But she is also, right, a litigant in civil cases.
Yes.
And she has now on the table admitted, or I'm assuming she's had to admit or going to have to admit, that she purposely purveyed falsehoods that worked against Dominion voting machines and perhaps poll workers. Has she set herself, may it be that the penalty she gets is larger in a civil case that would follow than in the criminal case that's been charged?
You have hit on the second thing I've been dying to say.
Oh, okay, good.
Can I give you my next theory?
Absolutely.
Yes. Y'all have been so
but you have to
excited about this. I am going to answer.
Okay.
My theory is going to give you an answer.
Okay.
I think the exact deal that she got has just, she believes it saved her in these cases.
Yes.
including any ethics issues with her own Texas bar license. Because she has, so Dr. Vial, I know you're referring to, there's at least one civil case against her right now for millions of dollars by Dominion Voting Systems, which has been also against Fox News and Trump and Giuliani. Mike Lindell, I think, is also one of the litigants in his own suit. So that started in January 2021. Then there have been multiple sanction attempts against her bar license in Texas. And there might be more than that. Those are the two civil pieces that I know, but there might be more. And I also have reason to believe, and I don't think I'm telling lies, and I hope that they're supported, but I have reason to believe that this month was supposed to be the time when she was giving depositions in the Dominion case. Which is definitely excellent timing with regard to the criminal case, because there are Fifth Amendment issues, right? Is, you have the right not to incriminate yourself. And if she had to use, if she had to testify in the civil case, would that testimony then be used against her in the criminal case? And if I am right, but I do encourage viewers and listeners to go and check me on this. If I am right, I believe she requested a postponement of the discovery answers and the depositions so that she could keep, her Fifth Amendment rights while she was dealing with the criminal trial. By pleading guilty, she has now saved herself, because she no longer has the rights not to incriminate herself in this trial, because she's pled guilty. So there are there are no more privileges in the criminal trial. Right. So she cannot and does not have to plead the Fifth in a civil deposition, in a civil hearing. She can testify for those. She can sign answers under oath now without technically a fear of incriminating herself. But my overall fun idea, fun in the sad sense of the word, legally interesting, how's that? Legally interesting idea is that I think she might have saved herself, because Dr. Vial, I like the words you were using when you were asking your question, is because you were targeting, you and Chelsea, I think, have both been assuming that, well, she will have been convicted of essentially crimes of lying, cheating, and stealing, right?
Right.
But that's not what she's been convicted of. Her original false elector scheme indictments were felonies. They were all felonies. Right. But those were to commit election fraud, commit computer theft, computer invasion of privacy, conspiracy to defraud the state. So those were specific fraud and theft related statutes that, had she been convicted under them, not only would they have been felonies, but they are also crimes of lying, cheating, or stealing.
Moral turpitude.
Would be, yes, moral turpitude, crimes of moral turpitude. And instead, this is such a sweetheart deal, because not only is it now misdemeanors with no jail time, but the actual misdemeanors are six of intentional interference with performance of election duty.
Which does not sound like a lying crime to me.
It is not technically a crime of lying, cheating, or stealing, or moral turpitude.
So she's better off? Well, better off than she had been convicted, but is
correct?
Better off than if she hadn't pled and was exonerated?
Not in that way. I love that. That's great thinking for this late in the evening.
Especially from a non-lawyer. Yes.
Right? Look, okay, you may be a non-lawyer, but you are an expert in constitutional law, the Constitution, politics.
Clearly, the Constitution doesn't have very much to do with this case.
Look, politics. You are a political science scholar. This is what all of this is, and the law.
Okay.
Anyway, so if she had been found not guilty, no, that is the best of the best, right? You go through this whole trial and you're completely exonerated. You're found not guilty. Now, there's the court of public opinion, just like with Casey Anthony and O.J. Simpson. But legally speaking, you're best off in civil cases and ethical issues, et cetera, if you're found guilty of nothing.
Right.
But beyond that, misdemeanor is a lot better than a felony. Yeah. And a crime not of moral turpitude is a lot better than a crime of moral turpitude. Yeah. And in Texas, have you all seen that the ethics, they've been going after Powell for her bar license for a couple of years now.
So they started by saying, because there's been multiple of these complaints and disciplinary hearings, right? They started by saying that she essentially is filing frivolous lawsuits, which you're not allowed to do. But somebody did, I don't know if you guys saw this, with her recent plea, as of a couple hours ago, my fake watch, I'm checking, that someone from the Texas Bar Association did give a statement that said there currently are disciplinary proceedings happening, but this plea will not be brought into it at all.
And that I've been seeing similar things. And Dr. Powell, I'm not sure if you've even seen much about this.
There's similar questions involving John Eastman in California. And Giuliani, if I remember, has already been disbarred from at least one state on the basis of evidence, similar evidence.
Yeah, he definitely was. And Michael Cohen was too. Mm-hmm. I mean, separate from the elector scheme, but he's also been disbarred. And there's not a great track record of Trump attorneys here. But from my understanding, there have been multiple allegations made against Sidney Powell through the Bar Disciplinary Committee or to the Bar Disciplinary Committee in Texas. And they continue to fail. I am not certain what is currently on the table. And I saw a fascinating article earlier tonight, and I honestly can't remember where it was, but another attorney, a Texas attorney, was claiming that, well, this one's really got her this time because there's a passage somewhere in Texas where you get disbarred for, quote, serious crimes. So even misdemeanors, but I looked it up, of theft, embezzlement, fraud, or conspiracy for similar crimes. I think she just took herself out of that. Because
maybe she's a better attorney than we thought she was.
Right?
I mean, yeah.
Exactly.
Crazy as a fox. You heard that term?
Yes, crazy as a fox. I mean, there's a reason she was good as an attorney in many ways. And I think she looked at this and said, wow, I can take myself out of this, quote, serious crimes clause by pleading to misdemeanors that don't have anything to do with theft or fraud, where I was facing multiple felonies for theft or fraud or conspiracies for theft or fraud. I'll take care of everything. I'll do a couple years probation, which basically means don't violate any more laws. And now that I'm not working for Trump anymore, that probably isn't, very likely. I don't know, but I think she weighed her pros and cons. And this sweetheart deal, I think, was too good to pass up. And I am wondering, is Chesebro going to get a better one, a similar one, or is he out of luck as of Friday morning?
I think it depends on what information he has. That's the key, right? Like, what does he know? And can he give the prosecution something worth bargaining for that they can't get from her?
He does seem to be, and Dr. Viola, I'll have you speak on this. That leads, Chelsea, that's a great lead into a little piece here where of all of the players in this terrible play, in this tragedy that is unfolding, the Shakespearean tragedy we're witnessing, Chesebro seems to be a larger player, at least with Trump himself. Where you can say Sidney Powell's one of the larger front people. great word, public figures. But when it comes to the backroom deals, when it comes to the original conspiracies, how are we going to do this? The person on the ground, so to speak, with Trump, at least as alleged in this very lengthy indictment, the continuous acts, he continues to be listed over and over and over as in discussions with Trump.
So he's maybe the John Dean.
Oh, how so?
Well, John Dean was the counsel to President Nixon, and it was he was in on all the meetings. He's the one who, before the tapes were revealed, said, on this date at this time, there were 4 of us in a meeting, and President Nixon said this, and Haldeman said this, and Ehrlichman said him. So he's more of the insider. And if he were to flip, it would probably be his advice probably was not nearly as public as Powell's was. And so would be more use, we already sort of know what Powell has said. We don't necessarily know what advice he gave or what Trump was telling him.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great analogy. And it seems, especially in reading, I know not everybody's going to, like me, read this very lengthy indictment, but in reading it, that's how it reads, is he's the backroom dealer, the one making the calls on Trump's behalf, the one who created this scheme, who cooked it up and started pushing the drugs, so to speak, that Sidney Powell bought.
He would be similar in that respect, probably to Mark Meadows.
Mm.
Had a similar, he seems to be the one getting the phone calls, particularly on January the 6th. And, whether he did anything about him is a little bit harder to ascertain. But if anybody knew what was happening, it was probably him.
Right. Yeah, he seems closer to an Eastman as well, as he and Eastman seem to be the 2 attorneys that were writing and passing memoranda about how to cast these fake electoral votes, how to find fake electors, how to get them to sign certain things, which states you would need them. So the overall planning, they seem to be the planners, versus Sidney Powell, who seems to have been the public mouthpiece that everyone would see, versus the people behind the scenes and behind the schemes. So I do think that catching Chesebro with a plea deal would probably be the bigger fish. And quite honestly, the one that would scare Trump a lot more than Sidney Powell, because I think he could be very dismissive of Powell, of what, the Kraken? All of a sudden the jury is like, oh yeah, that crazy person. And he's not the crazy person, is the idea to pass in front of a jury. So I think in my mind, he would be less scared of her having made a deal than if Chesebro, I apologize, we've been going back and forth on pronunciations, than if he makes a deal. So maybe by the time this airs, when he's on the courthouse steps, he's already making the deal we're discussing now, but it will be interesting to see. And there's the pause. Does anyone have, I spent the whole time excited.
We have meaning in our lives if the trial doesn't go on for the next 3 months.
Gosh,
and we're going to have to wait till January.
Hallelujah.
Now, Chelsea. As an attorney, it's like the Johnny Depp trial where people, they want to see it.
No,
They want
to
to know.
Sorry, let me clarify. I am frustrated because I either want to be in it or done with it. Like I want to be there live.
They're not going to admit you to the jury, even if you are from Georgia. It's not going to happen.
Look, Fulton County, call me, okay? I can promise I can be unbiased. That's what I'm saying. I need to go do some investigative reporting. Like, Mom, I'm coming home. I got to go to a trial. Like, I either want to be in it or for it to be done.
I have been on the edge of my seat as an attorney in this time. Certainly not a happy time, certainly not something I'm excited about in the sense of a joyful or pleasurable excitement, but more of the legal theories that are being propounded, the legal players and the cases. It is like being in the time of a Watergate.
Yeah.
Where it seems momentous.
One of the consequences of Watergate for your profession was a lot of people went into the law at that time. because it was so much in the news. And, frankly, these kind of cases, I mean, they're not maybe as consequential to people's individual lives as collecting for an automobile accident or something like that. But they seem lawyers sort of take the role that de Tocqueville, once talked about, that they're sort of the aristocrats in American society, and that they have an undue, or not undue, but disproportionate impact. And so I would expect, partly depending on the results here, but that a lot of people may be stimulated to think about law in a way they previously hadn't, as, here's a way to stamp out corruption or to assure the survival of democracy, or not,
right, for
whatever
either
the results
side.
are.
Quite frankly, for either side. And I get picked on a little bit, and us in a group on the show get labeled more Trump haters, whether we are or we aren't. I try to be as unbiased as possible, and we try to overall give a more neutral opinion, or at least say when one is one toward or against one
myself
side.
A democracy, Republican, small r defender.
Yeah,
not a hater.
Frankly, for the first time on air, I'm going to call myself a fairly probably best labeled as an independent.
Virginia, I will say I feel like the most moderate person I know, and like all of your opinions, like truly, I mean that as a compliment. Like I feel like you, and this is why you're so good at being an attorney, is you very much do see the both sides to things, and you are truly like the most moderate person I think I've ever met in real life.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that, so people can see it's not just an act. But for that, I think especially for tonight and for these trials, whichever side you fall on, these are very sensitive times, and even words that we think are neutral. Times when we know we're not neutral, or times where we think we're trying to be neutral, both sides will find fodder where they want to. Both sides, to exclaim that we are pro-Trump or anti-Trump or other labels. All I ask for all of you who are listening, certainly like and follow us so that you can see our next shows, follow along as we go through the coming months. Yeah. But please feel free to leave a comment. But please, honestly, quite frankly, we don't need the hate perpetuated on our show in the comments. And we have been quite, in all seriousness, we have been getting comments especially on our TikTok, where we pull out portions of our shows, where we've gotten very angry and comments, including many curse words. And that's just unnecessary. We're not trying
to watch, right?
Right. If you don't like it, just move on.
Scroll
You don't have to post those comments.
Or tag me, because I'm mean and Virginia's not. You can go ahead and shoot it straight at me.
Yeah,
but whatever you do, don't come after a college professor.
No, you're not a lawyer.
Look, all complaints can be tagged at my TikTok. I'm tagged in the TikToks, and me and that person can have a back and forth, and that's fine.
Yeah, we're trying to keep this as civil as possible. Talk about what's happening. Yes, there are some opinions behind it. Yes, clearly we're intrigued by some things more than others. We think some arguments are better than others, but we're certainly not trying to demean either party or either side. And ultimately, what we're looking at is strategy, a lot of strategy in politics and in the law. And we look forward to continuing to follow that strategy and the law and all of these players in the coming weeks. So, Dr. Vial and Chelsea, thank you for staying up with me late at night to get this going. All of you, we are holding our breath, and we'll see with you on Friday what the outcome is, whether we start seating a jury, whether there's a last minute plea deal, and what happens starting Friday and next week. Yes. All right, everybody. Thank you both, and we will catch you next time on the Legal Weekly Wine.
Bye.